Hey guys, thanks for joining us for another episode of Construction Over Coffee. I am your host, Jeff Raymond. Today, I have with me Todd Mandley. He is the Director of Construction Management at the Alamo College District. It is the largest provider of higher education in South Texas, consisting of 5 colleges, which serves an 8-county region with a student population of 100,000 and growing. Todd, those are some significant numbers. Thanks for coming on the show. Great to speak with you, and welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. So let's start a little bit about with what you're doing. That's a huge population, and as you mentioned, it's only growing by the day.
Yes. Like you mentioned in the intro, we do have 5 independent colleges. We're unique. We're some universities, all the colleges fall underneath one umbrella, but our college systems are 5 separate individually accredited universities, which is controlled by the district office, which is where the board, the finance, HR, and construction and facilities functions reside. So we provide that construction management and engineering support to all 5 of the colleges. We do have currently a large construction going on for what we call our bond. So every 5-10 years, we do an election for bond with the community, they vote on it. And then we have about $500 million worth of construction right now going on the various different colleges, expanding our footprint even further. We currently have about 5 million square feet right now. The $500 million bond is growing. We also got a large injection of funding from, all of our various individual colleges receive federal funding. We have the St. Philip's College, which is a historically Black university, so we get the HBCU funding, as well as all the emergency COVID funding as well, to make sure that we ensure that our facilities are safe during the COVID transition. And that we're a lot of design, renovation, modernization of facilities, because our St. Philip's campus, obviously was founded in 1885, but we don't have any 1885 buildings laying around. But they are still older campuses, kind of in the downtown San Antonio College is kind of an older campus. So a lot of preventive maintenance projects that we're working on, as well as infrastructure planning. I have a large master planning effort going on. As we talked about earlier, there's the San Antonio area is growing pretty rapidly. And with that, our population is increasing as far as the market for students that come to our universities. And we were supposed to do a master planning session prior to COVID. And then obviously when COVID hit, it kind of changed everything. So now, because of the large population influx, and we want to make sure that we have the ability to provide education services to community, we started a master planning session to kind of really look at historical data and look at our enrollment as it's starting to increase as we kind of bounce back from COVID. So that's where we're kind of working through right now.
Awesome. Now, you mentioned 2 things, construction and engineering support. The 2 don't always go hand in hand.
No, they don't. So the services we provide, just kind of giving you an idea is, so our funding is, prior to coming over to the Alamo College District, I was in the military. I worked on, the federal side, and how we get funding is vastly different from community colleges. So when we get funding, sometimes it comes in the forms of grants, or federal dollars, or other means. And sometimes that funding has a very short timeline assigned to it, where you have to expend the funds by a certain time. So engineering support, I work hand in hand with Director of Facility Operations, where we'll provide services to the colleges where we have some issues with some buildings. The ground here in San Antonio is very unique, and it's unlike I've done construction anywhere else. So you'll have anywhere from karst foundations where you worry about caves and that type of stuff to very expansive soils, which create unique foundations that we have to go through. And then additionally, water management is very big because when it rains in Texas, it rains and it floods very quickly.
Oh, yeah.
So we provide that kind of subject matter expertise to help identify issues or solve issues that the colleges are facing, either through, old buildings structurally with issues with ground movement or with water management. And then sometimes those services will also result in construction projects because we need to fix an issue that we find. So yeah, it's unique how we help them out.
So it sounds like you're definitely on the water resources, the geotechnical engineering side of the house. Now, do you also get involved in the facilities engineering side of the house?
Yes.
Okay.
So we do, in that, I'll give an example. We have one facility is they have a wellness center, and it's just, it's a pool, and they have an open area within the pool where they like to do some type of functions. Obviously, the sound in that area isn't the best location for doing some type of function. So talking with the college and the president of the college and the vice president of college services, like, oh, we're just going to go by and hang up some sound attenuation devices to help with that. Like, well, you have a sprinkler system up there, you have lighting, you have mechanical, electrical, plumbing. So
what could go wrong?
Yeah, you just can't. And then there's also how heavy are they, structural. So that request will come to us, and then we'll go out and kind of do a site visit. And then we'll bring on, engineering services as needed. If we have, I don't have a large engineering staff. Where I have gaps, we'll just go out to the local, AE firm and bring them on. But we kind of show that, the college staff, hey, look, you've got sprinkler heads here. You use, it's a life safety issue. You can't impede the sprinklers, and NFPA, 18, all these other rules that that the educators really don't worry about, because we're there to make sure. So we take that vision of, we want to impact the sound attenuation and make sure that we could do some functions in here. So let's do it the right way. So we'll come on board and help them through that process.
Okay. So construction engineering sounds like you're also involved in the MEP side and the fireproofing, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fireproofing, fire protection. You're really running the gambit.
Yeah, from cradle to grave, we do everything. So, during our bond, we're building new buildings to replace older buildings, right? So we also have to, do a disposition of the older building as far as, if we're demoing, we have to work that end of it. We do have historical buildings too. So working with the city of San Antonio in regards to our historical facilities, and the maintenance of those type of facilities is also, integral into making sure that we meet the requirements for the city to maintain the facilities is a big issue too.
San Antonio is definitely an older city, and there's a good number of structures out there that are historical, and you just can't come in and start demoing or excavating them. You really need to, I guess, preserve them, renovate them. That is an interesting line of work in itself. And I'm curious, how much of time would you say is spent with new construction versus preserving some of the older historical buildings?
Well, I would say it's not too far from one another, because you really never ever have enough money to do everything you need to do, right? It's
Sure.
just never there. So we do have some older historic buildings, some really beautiful buildings that go back to the 1900s. We were using them a while ago, but because of the conditions of the buildings, we don't want to use them anymore. It's not that they're unsafe, it's just that we just couldn't put the effort or the funding into the buildings to get them to where they need to be.
Sure.
So we had to develop a plan with our funding to figure out how we can maintain the building in phases. So the first thing we obviously want to do is make sure the envelope is totally secure, so we don't get water in the building. We don't have to worry about water damage or mold, everything else. So that's what we kind of did, was is focus on the plan on how we're going to use our maintenance dollars to go at the buildings in phases to maintain them and restore them and bring them back to their beauty, so we can move back into them. And then new construction, like I said, I've got about 500 million in bond work. I've got another 60 million in non-bond work.
Mhm.
And I've got another 30 or 40 million in just preventive maintenance projects. And I have 10 people.
Skeleton crew.
Yeah, so I have 5 project managers and 5 project coordinators, or like project assistants. So you can see that there's a lot of work on our plate that we have to manage, but we also work with like my counterpart, the director of facility operations, and his superintendents, and he has a staff as well too. So sometimes my customer is the director of facility operations, and the superintendents of the colleges, to make sure that we're getting the preventive maintenance projects where they need to be. And then sometimes my customer is a college president, because we're either doing a major renovation to one of their existing facilities, or we're building a new facility for them.
Makes sense. Now, one of the most exciting things, I guess, about the San Antonio area is the population growth. People are moving there. We've talked about this in the show before with other guests, but for every one person leaving Texas, there's 6 or 7 that are moving in. So I think the biggest opportunity can also become one of the biggest challenges. People moving to an area is great. It stimulates the local economy. It brings revenue and it brings income to the area. But I think people often forget 10,000, 20,000, 50, 100,000, whatever the number may end up being, of those people moving to the area, they now need gas stations, they need schooling, they need hospitals, they need grocery stores, they need places to live. The list goes on and on. So, with the surge in new population in the area over the last couple of years, especially the last year, what changes have you and your organization had to make? And, do you see that population boom continuing?
Yeah, I do down in South Texas, I see the population continuing to grow. Now, it may slow down a little bit, but I think it's always going to continue to grow because of the opportunities down here in San Antonio. So as far as a college, so it's that kind of what we call the flash to bang, right? So you see the large influx, and then we're kind of working through our master plan. So typically, if this was a non-COVID year, we would have had 1 year of student data, student loan. We should be able to see the growth, right? As people move into the area, we'd see enrollments go up. We would see what colleges had a growth, how much would the percentage of a growth, and utilization of classrooms. Space planning is my piece where I'd work with a college to figure out, are they utilizing their space efficiently? Do we need to renovate college classrooms to provide more space, more room, or take other space that we had that we changed it from classrooms to administrative space back to classrooms? We would go through that process, but because we didn't have a year of actual student load in the physical buildings, because we shifted our education to online like most colleges did during COVID, we don't have a true load. So what we have to do is we still have to continue forward with master planning. So the plan we're doing now is that we're taking our load from pre-COVID and kind of looking at 2 years of student load. Now, as we're starting to register for the fall season coming up, we're going to about a 75% occupancy, because we have this go back to school plan kind of phased. So we're looking at our enrollments right now at that 75% occupancy and kind of looking at how that's going to impact our facilities. And then we're going to wait about a year, or maybe a little bit more than a year, to get true load on the buildings. And then from there, I think because of the growth, and obviously we're taxpayer funded, right? So with the home sales and property taxes increasing, we may look at potentially being able to bond earlier, to do more construction to compensate for that growth. That's what the finance and accounting people within they're the ones that work magic with our funding. And the hope is that we should be able to hopefully bond a little bit earlier to get another injection of construction funding to be able to build for this growth.
Awesome. Now, you mentioned the word load a couple of times. For the viewers that don't understand the principle of load or the definition being used here, can you explain that?
So we have a system, I forget what it is called, but when you schedule classes, right? So if you're taking English 101, right, you're basically signing up for a class, but unbeknownst to the college student, we're tracking the classroom and the seat, right, and the square footage associated with that seat, and how many students. Right now, we had to go back and redo what is the class size for 75%. So if we had 100 room classroom, we can only put 75 in there, right? So now we have to look at, so that basically that load is the student in the seat in the classroom. And if the classroom is a 100-person classroom and we're consistently filling it at 100 students, or if we're not filling it at 100 students. So we look at balancing our class schedules to get the best utilization out of the space that we have. So if we run out of space because we have so many students, but just not enough square footage, then that's when we have to look at, building or renovating something to accommodate that. So that's what I'm referring to as a load, is that student in the chair, face to face with the instructor, occupying square footage in a classroom.
Got it. One of the biggest challenges that the last year, nearly year and a half, has created was the uncertainty. And uncertainty presented itself in a wide variety of ways, depending on the business you're in, geography, et cetera. For some firms, the uncertainty was, are the lights going to stay on? For others, it was, how do we keep up with the pace? How do we keep up with demand? And it sounds like for you and for your team, it's the latter, keeping up with demand. But with that uncertainty in terms of enrollment, students going online versus in classroom, I can imagine that definitely creates a lot of uncertainty for you and the team.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the positive things that came out of COVID is that there was a lot of work that we need to do in the colleges, right? So now we didn't have to worry about scheduling construction around classroom times. We didn't have to worry about scheduling maintenance around classroom time because classes were empty. So, I mean, for us, it was a positive because we could get in, we could do a lot of the work without disrupting the college's ability to fill seats, right?
Nice.
Now, I think we've learned a lot of, I think, as everyone's learned in the COVID pandemic, is that the model for instruction may change. And again, our leadership in the college is looking through this, and we're looking at various ideas, not just for our employees and where they're going to sit every day. And as far as the college students, some classes do require that face-to-face interaction, right?
Yes.
100%. Some classes may require a hybrid where it's 50% face-to-face and 50%, online. And other classes may could go 100% online. So as the educators and the leaders figure out, how to break that out, we have to do an analysis of the square footage on how we're going to be able to support that for the students. Now, like English 101, right? That could be 100% online, just for an example. Your basic English class. So whatever square footage we had set for those classes in the various colleges, they could all be transitioned to maybe a laboratory class where they actually have to go in and do work. So we have to look through that. So we've had multiple conversations about what the future may look like, and how that's going to impact. And the best thing about it is with our university is that the facilities team, we're always at the table at that discussion, because the leadership clearly understands that, you just can't go in and move a wall. It's not that simple.
No, doesn't work like that.
No, it's not.
Unlike you see on the home improvement shows on TV.
Right. There's a
Let's
lot
move
of
a wall here.
There's a
Yeah,
lot of
okay.
behind the scenes permitting and structural engineers coming out and signing off, and the city and the authorities having jurisdiction going through and doing their inspections. Yeah, there's a lot of that stuff that happens on the behind the cameras that no one ever sees. But in real life, we have to do that. We have to make sure that we keep up with life safety code. We have to make sure that as we move rooms, our evacuation plans change. So it's all those second and third order effects that
Yes.
putting a wall up, that normal non-construction don't see.
Agreed. There's certainly more than what meets the eye there. The three biggest challenges we noted for firms that are in the architecture, engineering, construction, skilled trade space, we really boiled it down to three. The first we addressed, which is uncertainty. The second is inflation across the board. And the third is the use or the lack of use in technology. Let's segue a bit from uncertainty into inflation. Folks have seen that the inflation number that came out recently, I think it was between 3% and 5% or so. That real number really feels closer to 10%. You look, gasoline is up, my goodness, 50% in the last 6 to 12 months. Commodity price, building material prices have just skyrocketed. They've pulled back a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but that's great. Labor costs across the board have increased. So how is you and your organization dealing with those massive increases? I guess the cost of building at this point.
Yeah, that's it's a good question. It's a very difficult thing. So it's like I have two projects I'm working on right now. These projects were kind of envisioned a few years ago, and they work with local senators and congressmen to get state appropriations to do these two facilities. We got the funding, and then we started to go through that long process of kind of visioning and kind of figuring out what it is that we want to build. And as we started, the users had an expectation of, we're going to get this space, right? We're going to get this size building, this space. And then boom, costs go up. Steel's 30-40% more expensive, right?
Concrete,
so you got
wood.
Wood. I mean, you
Lumber,
name it. Yeah, lumber. I mean, everything is just cost. So, we have really good relationships with our architects and engineering firms that we use. We have a really good relationship with our construction firms, because we use construction manager at risk as our acquisition and delivery method. So, and we just had a conversation really last week where we had to go back to the president of the college and say, hey, this size facility you thought you were going to get, we can't deliver it to you because the costs are just not there. The budget's not there. So we asked the college, is there any additional funding that you can bring to the table to get the product or the end product you want? And the answer is no, we don't. The funding is what we have. It is what it is at this point in time. So we have to go back to the architect and say, hey, now the cost based off what the construction manager is saying. Go back, redo it, and kind of give us a plan of what you think this space is going to look like. And it's probably only about 1,000 or 2,000 more square feet than what they're currently in, when they're looking to get another 4,000 to 5,000 square feet. So then you got to have that difficult conversation of, well, the money is going to go away. right? We just can't just shelf it and wait for construction costs to go down, because who knows? You can shake it, the magic 8 ball. You can look in your crystal ball. Who knows when this is going to get better? So the decision was to go forward with what we have. I mean, it is what it is at this time. We have to build. We have to build, and then we'll just kind of manage, the expectations of the users on the size facility we're going to get. And it's both facilities, because it's different architects, but the same construction manager for both these projects. So after we had that conversation, I was like, okay, so when are we having the conversation about the other buildings? Okay, well, we need to sit down and talk about that. So yeah, you're right. It's kind of difficult to build right now, because the cost is just exponential. But with our growth in how, in this region, we have no choice but to build what we can build. We just can't not build anything. Two reasons: the funding it has to be spent, and two, the population's here, so we have to put square footage up. So yeah, it's difficult.
It is, being familiar with some of that, I guess the funding, it's a use it or lose it. It's time sensitive. It has to be used or it goes away. A lot of, all the research that we had really done over the last couple of months, both internally and in speaking with folks on the ground, different research firms, different building material providers, a lot of what we saw and what we were advising our clients on was pointing to Q3 of this year, Q4 of this year, where you start to see those costs normalize. And by normalize, we don't mean drop like a rock, go back to pre-pandemic levels, but where you see the cost start to slow, normalize, or pause a bit. And interesting enough, I'm sure you've been looking over the last few weeks, those costs have started coming down. Lumber fell under $1,000, which was great on the futures market. Steel, rebar, concrete, some of the rare earth metals, and some of the soft metals also they've pulled back a bit, which is good. Whether that is the start of I guess a new cycle, or whether that's simply a pause, remains yet to be seen. But all of what we were seeing was pointing to a normalization of the cost in Q3, Q4, and pointing to the supply chain starting to play catch up. We've talked about this in the show, but go try to get a new car, get a new couch, a sectional, a refrigerator, go get a used car, see what you're paying. The supply chain was really, for lack of a better word, choked. I think what people on the outside failed to understand was, these costs are real. Yes, a part of them is inflationary, but a lot of it is demand driven. For a lot of industries, we simply blew through inventory that was there. And a lot of what you're seeing hit the market. It's no longer inventory, it's new production. But again, what we're seeing is pointing to Q3, Q4, and believe it or not, Q3, July it's right around the corner. Hard to believe. That's where we see kind of a pause or a start of a return to some kind of normalcy. So hopefully that is the case and gives you and your district some much needed relief and reprise here.
I hope so. I mean, I think hopefully less, because, as a Lotus district, before I got into construction, everyone, reduced the size of the warehouses because we did just-in-time delivery for our logistics, right?
Right.
In a booming economy where resources are abundant and there's nothing choking that supply chain,
Sure.
just-in-time is great. But once we go through it now, just-in-time doesn't work. So hopefully a lot of these companies, we've talked to some of our vendors for stuff, going, hey, construction's not going to slow down in South Texas. It's going to get, that whole corridor, San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, that whole corridor is growing exponentially. As these local vendors and stuff, we talk to them, are you going to get warehouses back? Are you going to start stocking up on stuff that we're using for construction, because just in time does not work.
Not anymore.
Nope. Nope.
One of the biggest risks we're seeing in the supply chain has been the lack of qualified labor.
Yeah.
The pandemic kind of exposed that there was definitely a shortage in the trade. There was a shortage in certain supply chains of qualified people, but that shortage has definitely been exacerbated. So a lot of what we're seeing now is some of the larger firms, larger school districts, they're doing okay. Larger GCs, they're doing all right because they buy in such bulk that it's a little bit easier to get what you want when you want a lot of it. You're willing to pay top dollar, and you have that relationship with the vendors or suppliers. Where we're really seeing a lot of struggle is the smaller and mid-sized firms and districts that can't afford to put such a large deposit or can't afford to commit to such a large order. They're really getting suffocated. And that is true on the commercial side and especially on the residential side. The smaller home builders are 6 to 12 months behind in new construction. A lot of what we've seen is they're simply they're telling future homeowners, I know we said it would be about 6 months, but we're going to wait 1, 2, 3, 6 months before we even begin construction in the hope that things catch up. And the lumber mills the sawmills, they were shut down in different states for a long period of time. And you've really seen the result of that. But again, what we're seeing, what the research and the data is pointing to, Q3, Q4, you see things start to return to some sense of normalcy. One other thing I'd like to point out too is obviously we've seen a rapid increase over the last year or two in home prices. And that's been great for your district because typically higher home prices, there's a slight bump up in property taxes. People look at the price of their home, what it's worth on Zillow and Redfin, and they say, great, my home is up 20%, but my property taxes are only up 2%. But for your district, 2%, that's big money. 2, 3, 5%. That's significant for the budget, I imagine.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of shakes out. You talked about the trades. It was funny because before I came to San Antonio and retired from the Army, I was at Fort Knox, Kentucky. I was building a clinic there. And Fort Knox, I don't know if you're familiar with the geographical area, but it's about 45, maybe an hour south of Louisville. And it's a rural area. And we're building a clinic on the post, and there's some other construction projects going on, the insulation as well, and one right next to us. And my question to the general contractor is how are you going to manage your labor, because we're in a rural area, there's not a lot of skilled labor in this area. Oof. And all these projects on post they're all going to fight for the electrical, they're all going to fight for the plumbing, they're all going to fight for the contracting. So I asked the insulation engineering team there to help manage that for these projects, because I didn't want them starting all up at the same time and all be fighting for the same resources. So when I came here and retired from the Army, I thought, oh, it's a large city, I'm not going to have any problem with labor. No, that's not the case. It is. A lot of these large construction companies, they don't have labor, right? They have the team that manages the project. They got to go out and find labor because they're not doing a large percentage of the work themselves. They're subbing everything out. And so we're all fighting in this growth, right? In this city, we're all fighting for pretty much the same electrical, the same plumbing, the same concrete, right? We had an issue where we had to fix some concrete. And, because we'd already poured it and it needed to be fixed, and we were already off schedule for our concrete work was done, that activity was done, we had to fight to get the contractor to come back out to address it. Now, luckily it wasn't a critical path activity and it could wait, but if it would have been a critical path activity, it would have delayed our project by, weeks and cost us, money and general conditions, sitting around waiting for the concrete person to come back to fix this, issue.
The biggest problem with labor we see in the larger metropolitan areas and cities is there's a lot of firms that are competing for the same talent. They're all pulling from the same talent pool.
Yeah.
But when you get to the rural areas, it's not there's so many firms, it's just there's not enough people living there. Look at the number of skilled electricians in a place like Jacksonville, Florida, or Dallas, Texas. Now go to Topeka, Kansas, and see if you can pull the same numbers. You just won't. We talk about this a lot, and the original purpose of this show and why we do this is to bring awareness to the wonderful industries that we work in, to bring awareness to construction, engineering, architecture, the trades, and to stay up to date with industry trends. I think there's a lot of reasons why you don't have enough people in those industries. One in particular is when most kids are growing up, what are they told? They're told the same thing: go to school, get a real job, go to college, get a degree, become an accountant, a lawyer, a doctor, work in IT, the list goes on and on. Very rarely are young men and women told, go into construction. It's a great career, great earnings. You'll love it. They're just simply never told that. So you have kids from basically birth to 18, 24 years where they never hear those words. And when you ask those people, what do you think people in construction do? Well, they bang a hammer into a nail and they have no idea what goes on behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. So the end result is the folks who kind of get into construction, they either fall into it, they have folks or family in the industry. That was, my case. They know somebody in there. There's just not a lot of organic growth, or inorganic growth in that industry. It's all organic. And I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on that, and what steps we can take as an industry to try to get more young people in this industry and help the growth accelerate, because it's desperately needed, I think, now more than ever.
Yeah, I mean, so I didn't come from a construction background either. When I was growing up, my family was either military or worked for the government in some way, shape, or form. So I kind of fell into it, and my impression was the same, like you said earlier. It's labor, right? I'm going out there and I'm just putting a bunch of wood on my shoulder and I'm walking from one point to another and dropping it, and there's really nothing behind it. I really didn't understand it until I got into a situation where I had to learn it, I had to do it, mm-hmm. And then found out, like you said, that there is those behind the scene things that are really lucrative and really can set yourself up for success in the future. I think it starts with, so when I graduated high school, it was you either go into college, go in the military. Yes. But they also had trades, right? In school back then, they had, I'll show my age, but back in the 80s and 90s, they had, they taught you auto mechanics, they taught you what, they taught that at the high school level. And even when you went through your counselor and stuff, they really talked about all the various different careers, and plumber and electrician and all those type of things were on the table. There's been some shift at some point in education where it's got to where it's go and get a 4-year degree. Because if you don't get a 4-year degree, you're not successful. You got to have a college degree.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I know, I know, master electricians, master plumbers that make over 6 figures, right? That are, they own their own business. They're self-employed and they're doing just fine without a college degree. So somehow there has to be a shift in I guess, teaching the kids, because I've got 2 girls, and I talk to them, 15 and 16, and I tell them, you don't have to go to college, right? You can go out and get a computer certification and make just as much money, without getting a 4-year degree. You can go out and get training and a skill that could make you, a comfortable lifestyle. You don't have to get $100,000 in debt with college loans.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, it's a very good question. As an industry, I guess we have to figure out how to change that perception at the, where these kids are in high school and engaging with these counselors to where it's actually an option. because most of the people I meet on the construction site, their father was an architect, engineer, or they were in construction. So they saw the life that their parents had, and then they realized that it's a very good business to be in, and came over.
I think growing up, the biggest takeaway I had, where I noticed that looking back, there really was a shift, is the perception was that all the not bright kids went to the voc or to the tech. They went to trade, tech school, vocational. It was for troubled kids. It was for kids that weren't smart, kids that couldn't get it together. And that's a real stigma that didn't go away. Instead of it being looked at as a first option for kids who needed that and who wanted that, it was looked at as, we tried everything. It's not just working out for little Johnny. Maybe he can go be a mechanic and figure stuff out. And that stigma is dangerous. It's unfair. It's selfish, elitist thinking, and it's damaging. There's, again, this unfortunate stigma that people in the trades are dumb, that they're not bright, and it couldn't be further from the truth. Yeah. And the point here isn't to demonize college. It's right for some people, right, but that should not be the first and only option for everyone. It should be an option available to you if you believe that it's right for you. One way that we here at Raymond Search Group, Construction Over Coffee, try to help with that is we do a lot of outreach with local organizations. A couple organizations heard really good things about. One that stands out is BYF, Build Your Future. We partner, with local unions and different organizations for GCs, builders, suppliers, and you start that outreach at that elementary, middle, high school level. You start putting the idea in these kids' heads that there is a whole other path for you in life. And it doesn't involve going to school for 4 years, getting into debt for 50, 100, or who knows what it's going to be in 5 or 10 years. You can get a great career. You can get training on the job. You can make a good living while you're actually learning, and you can learn skills that won't go away. They won't be outsourced, and they will not be automated.
Yep.
And I think those are 3 big takeaways. So it really starts at that younger level, getting people involved and engaged in those industries and letting them know it's viable. But I think more than anything, removing any stigma that people who get into it are, it's only for people who aren't smart. I mean, I guess there's certain stigmas about every industries, that people who get into tech are nerds. That's not true. People who get into finance and accounting are dull. That's not true. And people that get in construction are dumb. Again, that's not true. But that is, I think, a very damaging stigma that needs to go, that needs to get removed. And for everyone watching this, do your part in removing that stigma. When you hear people, say that, correct them, let them know when, you are talking to the next generation that could be in this industry, talk about what the trades can offer you and what these industries can offer. We have a labor shortage now, but if we don't address it, it is, I think, at some point going to be insurmountable unless we fix it.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head there. You're right. You have to remove that stigma. That's first and foremost what we have to do. It's a Herculean effort to do it, though.
Yes, because
we're teaching trades at our college, right, at the community college level, and it's these kids will come in, they'll learn a trade, and they'll go out and they'll immediately start making money. You see a lot of kids graduate college, and they really have no job experience, work experience, because they spent 4 years in college. So unless you get lucky, you're going to have to stumble through and kind of find a position. Whereas every single one of the trades in construction, once you come out, you're employable.
you're good to go.
Yep. I mean, if you're willing to move, to where the work is, there's no reason why you can never find a job in construction field. I mean, it's just go out to one of the job search websites and put in construction, and boom, you'll just see so many positions coming available.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. It really is. And I didn't know that until when I retired and I started looking for a position, and I was talking to my wife and family, and well, where do we want to live? Where do we want to go? What do we want to do? And then I said, let me just, look at what I do and put it into a job search engine and see what happened. And we're just going, whoa, I mean, the world's our oyster. We can go anywhere we want, and find stable, reliable construction employment,
Now, you bring up a really interesting point, transitioning out of the military after retirement, or for some folks after they fulfill their contract and they move on. How did you transition, and what tools did you use to get into the field or to get into the industry?
So how I got into construction. So, a lot of people think the Army is all about, boots on the ground and war and all that stuff. There's everything in the background that supports that effort, right? And construction and engineering is a big business in the Army. Just think about everywhere we go, we reconstruct countries, right? We bring them back up. And the Army, as well as all the other services do, they have that kind of same thing we do. We're going in there, we're building construction, we're revitalizing the countries. And that's how I stumbled into it. I was in Iraq. My first tour in Iraq, I was a medical platoon leader. And we got this request from the Ministry of Health to go out and do assessment on clinics in the Diyala province, which is kind of around Baghdad, because they want to rebuild that healthcare infrastructure. Well, they just can't get in a vehicle and drive out to the clinics, right? They need someone to escort them there and to go there. And that was tasked to me and my team to go out there and do that. And I worked with someone who was in the U.S. Army's what we call Health Facility Planning Agency, and their whole responsibility was design and build health facilities for the Army, either within our footprint within the U.S., also globally, and expeditionary as far as in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, to assist them in doing these assessments. And then I always ask this question. I've always been told, if you see somebody doing something you want to do, you need to pull them aside and ask them, hey, how did you get there? What did you do to get to where you are now? So I need to figure out what I need to do to get to where you are. And he pulled me off the side and said, hey, this is what we do. This is our agency, and this is what we're looking for. And this is what you need to do in order to become competitive to do this job. So then I just sat down, mapped out my career, and kind of started heading that way and got into construction that way. But yeah, it's once you get into that field, I got hooked immediately. It's because it's challenging. It's not the same thing every day. When I go to work, it is not the same thing every day. And I'm not stuck to a desk. I go out and I go project site visits. I go out and meet with vendors. I go out and meet with the various different colleges. I go out with my team. So it's a very, it's I don't understand why, like you said, it's that education of what we do. It's just not there to show, how lucrative this could be as far as a career.
Agreed. Again, that stigma, it runs deep. Most people think they, again, are just going to be driving nails into wood or picking stuff up and putting it down. And guess what? If that's what you want to do, there's nothing wrong with it. There's career path that's offer that. You want to be a carpenter, great. You want to be a day laborer, great. You want to do, you want to do shingles, you want to do asphalt, whatever, fine, great. But don't feel that doing that is less than doing something else. Another thing that I think doesn't get talked about enough here is the recession in 2008, 2009. knocked a lot of people out of
Yeah.
the industry. It
Yeah.
scared them off. It was mostly residential that really took a hit, but a lot of folks looked at the industry and said, it's too recession prone. We're either not getting into it or we're going to leave and we're never coming back. And they went into other fields. And I think a lot of folks who left during that 2, 3, 4, 5 year period, they didn't come back. And that was, it was a scary event. It was a scary time for those that were in it, but the industry is resilient. It bounced back. I was looking at the fastest growing wages by industry and sector, and shocker, architecture, engineering, construction, and the trades is they're all in the top 10. No surprise there. But I think one thing, thinking about this now, that we can do in addition to getting involved and removing the stigma is the industry as a whole is probably the slowest to change besides farming. I had someone come on, he said, look, the two slowest industries to change, farming and construction.
Yeah.
I thought about it. I said, you're right. You're right.
Good one. Yeah.
I can't think, maybe manufacturing or who knows, but typically those are the last two to change. And I think one thing that folks can do in the industry is really set an example of staying current with times and technology. And this, leads to our next point, technology. One bright spot, I guess, of the last year and a half has been firms have been forced to adapt to new technology. The days of having hundreds of thousands of pages stored away in a cabinet somewhere are gone. Most people are using DocuSign. They're managing things electronically. They're using on-screen different takeoff software. They're using tools to collaborate. We're talking via Zoom. I'd love to be recording this face-to-face, but we're doing this via Zoom. And I think something that leaders and folks in the industry can do is make it a point to adapt to technology, because the kids these days, they love tech. They love technology. They love being on their phones, which is fine. But if the industry as a whole adapts and uses technology, I think you really open it up to a whole new generation. And I'm curious, what adjustments tech-wise have you and the team had to make over the last year?
So you make a really good point. So document management is big, right, during construction, right? So from work induction of the demand, I need something, to building it and then turning it over to the facilities to maintain it. So all the documentation between those 2 points is critical for for audit purposes, as well as just kind of the life cycle of the building. So when I came on board, they were already leaning forward and looking at technology to help manage that process, because a folder out on a server somewhere with a bunch of stuff dumped into it doesn't really work very well, right? For us, kind of going back and look through historical documentation. So what we're bringing on board now is a construction management software. So college says, I want to renovate a building. They reach out to one of my project coordinator, they fill out a form or request saying what type of work they want to do. Project goes into the project management software or construction management software, and it has life.
Yes.
And then from there, it goes to funding, developing the project into pre-planning, planning, all the way up into, awarding an architect, bringing them on board, then awarding the construction manager, and then start the design process. All that's going to be in the system. And it's so we have an app on our phone. So like my project managers want to go out and do a site visit, right? Before, they would have to bring a clipboard with a piece of paper and a pen, go out, take pictures with their phone, and then fill out the site report, scan it in, send it, and would go into a folder somewhere. Now on our phone, we have an app where we click on that software, we pull up field report, which the form that we've generated, what it should look like. They could take pictures and do notes and save it and send it. And it goes right back up into the system and let certain key people know that the field report was done, so we can go in and review it.
Yes.
All of our changes are going to be done electronically. Our RFIs submittals are all going to be done electronically.
Okay.
So we're all using that technology. And we also started using, you've probably heard of BIM, Building Information Model, 3D modeling.
Mhm.
We use it the government side a lot. But we also pulled it over and we're using it now for 3D modeling because everyone likes to use for clash detection for above ceilings, right? So make sure that we're not, duct work and pipe work is all not just clashing above ceiling. And we'll also use it for quality assurance, quality control too. As far as before we do an activity, a major activity, when we sit down and we talk about the activity, we're looking at drawings. We're also looking at the BIM modeling, the 3D modeling, to where we're, for example, we're getting ready to lay a pool, concrete pool, right? So we're looking at structural drawings, we're looking at the pool consultant drawings, and we go into BIM modeling. We're checking depths and verifying them with the structural drawings. And sometimes we found where there's discrepancies. Whoa, wait a minute. There's a discrepancy in the depth of the pool. The structural drawings say this, the consultant drawings say this, and the BIM modeling says this. So now we have to sit down as a team and figure out why this is the case. And then we figure out what the issue is, and we solve a very expensive problem that could have been, pool could have been laid at the wrong depth. So we're pulling in all this technology to make the process a little bit more smoother, as well as kind of reduce design errors and save costs too.
Sounds like all your BIM and VDC is done in-house, right?
Yep. So it is in the
Nice.
construction manager. There's also other software too that we're looking at using. We use on the government side. When you get your as-builts, right, it's really nice to have a visual picture too of what's behind the wall. So there's some software and there's some vendors out there that what they'll do is they'll take pictures of the walls before they close them, and then they'll put it into a plan. So 5 years from now, I want to do work on this wall, and I just want to verify what's behind that wall. I could go to the system, I could click on the plan, it pulls up a picture and shows me what that wall looked like before we closed it. So technology like that helps a lot for day-to-day operations and maintenance and renovations as well too.
Could you imagine having to dig through a file cabinet and saying, okay, which room, which wall, which coordinates does this picture correspond to?
Yeah.
Now it's with the click of a button. We had an individual on the show who's in the residential, mostly residential and some commercial services. And they have technology now where they have a drone that flies over, captures the data points, and spits out the exact measurements that need to be used to install their product. Fascinating seeing what's changing over the next few years in here. I guess I noticed we're wrapping up here at about our hour block, and I want to be respectful of your time. What do you see changing specific to your industry, your geography over the next couple of years?
That's a good question. Well, I think for me specifically, within higher education, what's going to change for us is with the increase in costs, we're really going to have to take a serious look on how we build the space and utilizing the space inside a little bit better than what we're doing right now. A lot of architects to death, but sometimes they design stuff that is, well outside of what we really want. And then the users love it, right? But
Right on paper, not in reality.
Right. There's a lot of like circulation space in the big open areas and, gathering spaces and somewhere I can sit and look at a wall. So, I mean, stuff like that, we really have to get, because the cost of per square foot has gone up, right? So we really have to look at what we're paying per square foot and what we're actually getting for that square foot, because you have to make room, not just for the actual usable space, but all the other mechanical, electrical, and plumbing space that goes to support the building's function. Right. So it's becoming very tight. So I think us going forward, and we learned with the cost increase in these two projects and having a conversation with the team, was that we're really taking a strong look on what we're actually buying per square foot and what we're getting. And we're actually looking at redoing our standards for design and construction because of the cost increase. So our communications rooms, what we call them IDF rooms, are they too big, right? Do we really need this size communication room when there's only one rack and 3 switches? Do we really need 300 square feet for one rack and 3 switches, right? Because it's spec'd that way. So we're going through our design and construction standards to literally look at every single square foot of what we have, our break rooms, cleaning closets, because we need to really define our square footage because the cost has gone up exponentially. So that's going to be us in the future if we're looking at doing.
Do you ever see yourself, your team going the prefab or the modular route at all?
We may have to. We do have some temporary and modular buildings now in facilities that have grown that we just can't build quick enough, right? So we may go to look at other types of construction, and that's kind of what we've kind of been tasked to do, but we really haven't gotten to that point yet. These are all things we've kind of put in a map of what we think is going to happen 1, 2, 3, 4 year, 5 years out. So that is a possibility. An example is we were getting ready to build an auto body and welding building, and it was going to be a traditional, CMU block building. But we're like, well, why can't we just do some type of metal structure, right, or some other type of structure? It doesn't have to be CMU. Let's get with the HJA and the fire codes and everything associated with it to make sure we meet code. But there are other materials out there, like you said, that we could use that are less labor intensive for installation of CMU block.
Yes.
So because our design standard says it must be this. So now we're having to go back and revisit, what type of roofing systems are we using, everything.
Well, Todd, it has been phenomenal having you on the show. First and foremost, thank you for your service to our great nation. America cannot do it without you, and we are appreciative. So thank you. And thanks for coming on the show. For people who want to reach out to you, what's the best way to reach you, whether it's LinkedIn, email, something else?
Yeah, you can look me up on LinkedIn, Todd Mandley, Mandley, or feel free to reach out to me. My email is tmandley@alamo.edu.
Okay.
But they can either way, they could reach out to me at any time.
Okay, great. We're going to end the recording here. Hang on for a minute and we will wrap up.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.